Danis slammed his fist into his other palm. "We have them," he shouted. "Now all we have to do is go in and get them." "Yes, but not now," Talthrassar replied. One of Valeria's rangers, he had somehow assumed the role of Danis' advisor during their pursuit of the Horde, and despite his aloof manner, Danith liked him too. More often than not, the elf was right. "We need to wait until morning." "By morning they'll have dug in," Danith protested, glaring down at the slender, russeted-hair ranger, and then across the bone-littered trench of land to where the colossal ruins sprouted. "If we attack now, we can take them before they've had a chance to settle and build up defenses." "Look around you," Talthrassar urged. "You may be ready to fight, but your men are not. It's growing dark, and they are weary. Would you have them stumbling about underground, blind to danger and too tired to defend themselves from inevitable ambush?" Danith turned an angry, anguished face to the elf. "They killed Kurdrin." The news had shaken a group of men who were already exhausted from the brutal place Danith had set them. When the Wildhammers had returned, making no effort to hide the tears in their eyes at the thought of their fallen, including their beloved leader, Danith had been forced to turn away himself. He'd lost so many, and now the bluff, jovial dwarf too. How many would have to die before these damn green things were stopped? "I know," Talthrassar said quietly, "and you will not honor his spirit if you take men too exhausted to fight to avenge him. They will simply join him in death." Danith scowled, but he knew the elf was right. He'd pushed his men hard all the way from the Orcish citadel, trying to catch Ner'zhul's forces in time. It was ironic that now that they were too tired to do anything about it. "One night," he said finally. "We'll camp one night, rest, and attack at the first light." "A wise choice," Talthrassar agreed, and as usual, Danith could not tell if the ranger was being sarcastic or sincere. And as he always did, he decided to ignore the elf's tone and take his words at face value. "Have the men fall out and set up camp," Danith instructed his lieutenant. "We attack at dawn." Then, trusting his subordinates to take charge, he dismounted and led his exhausted and thirsty horse down to the river to drink. He splashed water on his dusty, sweaty face and drank deeply himself, then headed back to virtually collapse in his tent. A few hours later, when Danith awoke, he was surprised to see not only other tents, but also several tall posts outlining a large rough square. "What is all this?" he asked Herrick, one of his sergeants. "We're only here one night." Herrick shrugged. "Some of the men mentioned this would be a good place for a fort," he explained. "They wanted to set posts to mark it out. I didn't see the harm in it, so I said yes. It went fast. The elves helped." "In light of the sacrifice of our dwarven friends, I thought it would be a good gesture," said Talthrassar, stepping from the shady tree nearby and gliding over to them. "We are, after all, an alliance. How better to symbolize that than to start a stronghold together?" Danith stared at the elf. "You're the one who was pointing out how tired my men were, and now instead of resting, they're cutting and placing posts?" Talthrassar smiled. "It is but a few posts, and many hands make light work. See for yourself the results." Danith looked where he indicated. Dwarf, human, and elf stood together talking quietly. They still looked tired, but there were smiles on their faces, and one of Danith's men clapped the elf and dwarf on the shoulders as they spoke. "Your men were right. Not only does it have strategic value, but this is the only place we have seen thus far on this planet that was not red and lifeless. This forest, at least, is still very much alive. If we someday return to these woods and complete what was begun here today, we shall name it the Alarian Stronghold. It is fitting. The orcs destroyed much of Cael'Thalas, and so in return, we will claim this, the one green region left upon this forsaken world. And if not, these posts will stand as a reminder that the Alliance entered this forest and claimed it as their own. Talthrazar's voice had more passion in this short speech than Daneth had ever heard from him before. Daneth took another look at his men and nodded. Let's get those orcs first, eh? He accepted the food Herrick pressed upon him, found a quiet place by one of the campfires to eat, then stretched out his legs, crossed his arms over his chest, leaned back against the tree trunk behind him, and again fell asleep. Daneth started awake to the sound of yelling in Thalassian and a strange, eerie squawking sound. He leaped to his feet. What's going on? He didn't get a verbal answer in the chaos. Running toward the source of the noise, Daneth saw what seemed to him like a dozen elves piled atop something that was making an awful screeching sound. Step back, he ordered. The elves reluctantly rose, dusting themselves off, while two of their fellows kept a firm grip on one of the strangest things Daneth had ever seen. The intruder wore deep purple robes, now worn and stained with blood and grass. It was about the size of a man and had arms and legs, but the resemblance stopped there. Jutting from the cowl was not a human face, but the head of a bird. It had a long, sharp face, most of a glossy violet beak, and slanting oval eyes that glowed yellow in the night. A cluster of feathers rose above each eye like a human brow, and these merged with a shock of red, purple, gold, and brown feathers all around the head to form the equivalent of hair. One bright eye was partially closed. The elves had not been gentle in their capture. What manner of creature are you? And what were you doing skulking about our camp? Talthrazar demanded. You're wasting your breath, Daneth said. It can't understand our language. But Grizzak, yes, he does. And no harm he means. The creature's voice was a strange trill, but clearly understandable. Daneth blinked at him. He's like a trained parrot, all sound, no meaning, one of the men muttered, and raised a fist to silence the birdman. No, wait, Daneth ordered. Say that again. Grizzak. No harm he means, no. Only want to know who you be, why you come. Daneth glanced at Talthrazar, who shrugged, stepped back, and let Daneth direct the inquisition. Your name's Grizzak? At the rapid nodding, Daneth continued. Answer our questions, and maybe we'll answer yours. What are you? Grizzak is Arakoa, the birdman answered, his words oddly clipped, and each followed with whistles and sighs. Old race, oldest maybe in world, Grizzak curious, no harm. So you keep saying. But why were you spying on us? How do you know our language? Arakoa clever, Grizzak said proudly. Smart. Grizzak follow you, listen close, learn fast. Think you strange, curious. Are the Arakoa friends of the Horde or their enemies? That produced the greatest reaction yet. Grizzak's facial feathers puffed up like a frightened bird's, and he huddled in on himself. Fear and hate them, Grizzak. I do. Not bad ones, I have seen, but now, he shivered. Daneth had seen enough of Grizzak by now to realize he was no physical threat, and nodded to the elves, who still held the intruder. Give him water and tend to his wounds, he told them. To Grizzak, he said, explain. Arakoa, ancient people, we say to selves, but we watch peaceful Draenei, primitive orcs. But who could know? Madness come to orcs. What? We know not. Despite his heavy robe, he shivered, feathers shifting uneasily before he made a visible effort to continue. Orcs and the Draenei not friends. but they not hate. Respect. Whoa, whoa, said Daneth, holding up a hand. Slow down. Orcs and Draenei? Draenei as in Draenor? Draenor is name they call world, yes. They proud of selves. They name whole world for selves. They strong, before. You said there was a madness. The orcs turned on the Draenei? Grizzic nodded. Yes, yes. Once many Draenei. They use bright light. Live here long time. They think selves strong and good. No one stopped Draenei, no. But orcs. Grizzic made a whooshing sound and swept his arms before him. Gone. Only few left now. Now once proud Draenei hide away. Daneth felt a chill. The orcs wiped out a whole civilization. He glanced up at Talthrassar. Sounds like the Horde did a practice run before they came to Azeroth. Indeed it does, except Azeroth did not fall to them as Draenor has. We were stronger. Luckier, maybe. He shook his head and faced hard. A whole civilization of peaceful people. What a damn shame. He returned his attention to the Erickoa. Keep talking. You said the Draenei were peaceful, but also powerful, and that the orcs were primitive at first. How is it they were able to wipe out these Draenei? The orcs, Grizzic groped for words, come together, no longer separate. The orcs do have different clans, Talthrassar said. It sounds as if they were not always a unified, directed horde. Long Ears is right, chirped Grizzic excitedly. At any other time, Daneth would have laughed at the offended look that crossed Talthrassar's face at the insult. Orc ununited. They grew strong, cruel. Skin turned from this, he pointed to a brown feather, to this, he indicated a green color. Their skin turned color? From brown to green? Daneth said, raising an eyebrow. Yes. Then green orc attack and slay Draenei. Erickoa say we are next. He pointed to the massive ruins just visible through the trees. Akinduin. Draenei dead slept there. It is holy. Most. It patted the soil. Most is below ground? Daneth asked. Grizzic nodded. Winding. Below ground, yes. All dead now. A thought occurred to Daneth. Have you been there? To Akinduin, to these winding tunnels? Grizzic nodded enthusiastically. Do you know your way through? Daneth asked. Grizzic nodded. I have been down many times. But why you wish to go there? I am Daneth Trollbane of the Alliance, Daneth responded. We have pursued the Orcish horde here from our own world, and I intend to attack them on the morrow and see them dead and their threat destroyed. They are hiding in those tunnels. I'm going to find them. We could use your help. Talthrassar looked disapprovingly at Daneth, but the human ignored the glare. Grizzic seemed harmless enough, and he obviously hated the horde. If he could save them from getting lost in a maze in a city of the dead, Daneth was all for it. Grizz, I know a way in. Way that even orcs who live there now do not know. He leaned forward. I know where they live, and which passage new orcs will pick. Daneth and Talthrassar again exchanged a glance. That's incredibly useful information, Daneth said. After a moment, the Erickoa got to his feet excitedly, staring at the griffins which roosted in the trees, claws digging into the branches they had chosen, heads tucked under one wing. He hurried toward them. Magnificent, he whispered, reaching out to stroke the nearest griffin along a shoulder. The beast shuddered slightly but did not wake up. Daneth noticed that Grizzic's hands were more like talons than anything else, but his touch across the griffin's feathers was gentle. Here now, what are you doing? Exclaimed one of the wild hammers, hurrying toward Grizzek. Easy, Fergan, Dana said before the dwarf tackled their potential new guide. They're called griffins from our world, Daneth explained to Grizzek. Each griffin has a rider, a wild hammer dwarf, like Fergan here. Grizzek had reached the last griffin in line, a magnificent beast that stood shivering as if cold, despite the fact that it was a warm night. She grieves, he said, stroking her shoulder and back. Ask Skyri, Fergan said in a voice that was gruffer than usual. Curdran's mount. Grizzek clacked his beak and cocked his head askew, peering at Daneth. Skyri's rider, Curdran, was the leader of the Wild Hammers, Daneth explained. He fell in battle today. Grizzek nodded. Ah, prisoner, I see him. Prisoner? Daneth exclaimed. The orcs bring captive with them into Auchenduin. Look like him, and the birdman pointed at Fergan. Red fur on chin, blue drawn on skin. He very loud. Daneth felt a surge of excitement. Curdran was alive. He turned to Talthrassar. We need to rescue him. The dwarf knew the risk, the ranger replied coolly, and the mission must come before personal attachments. But Daneth shook his head. Curdran is one of Turalian's most trusted lieutenants. The fact that he's even alive means that the Horde realizes he knows things about our forces that they'd find very valuable. If they can crack him, we need to get him out of there before that happens, and this, Eric Koa, can take us to him. Talthrassar sighed. Grizzek, no doubt it is dangerous for you to help us. Why do you do so? It is simple. You oppose Horde, Grizzek replied with a decisive clack of his beak. I too hate Horde, for what they have done to our Koa, to our world. Daneth looked from Grizzek to Talthrassar. The ranger nodded. It was the best chance they had, and if Grizzek did try to betray them, he'd pay, and quickly. Let's do it, he said. By the time Grizzek had sketched out a basic map of Auchenduin and the various tunnels, and explained them in common that grew clearer almost by the moment, Daneth had abandoned the idea of taking a small force in to rescue Curdran. Instead, he had a far better plan. Now he strode down a long, dark tunnel, only the torch in his hand providing any light. Grizzek was perhaps 10 feet in front of him, and Talthrassar was between the two of them, neither the Eric Koa nor the elf requiring additional light to make their way. And behind Daneth walked fully the Alliance army. Tunnels are wide. 10 Alliance people can go together, Grizzek assured him, and tall. Even ogre only stoops. Draenei built them well. Explosion that dust-destroyed central passages not reached the outer tunnels, still clean and dry and secure. They had convinced Daneth, especially once Relian had gone with Grizzek and reported back on the tunnel the Birdman had shown him. It's like the long hall in a palace, the ranger had said, exactly as he told us, and I saw no other movement, not even vermin. We will divide in two, Daneth had decided. Half of our forces will follow me through the tunnel and up into Auchenduin. The other half will attack the front, sneaking in through the temple ruins and down to distract the Horde, while we approach from behind. Once we're in position, we'll strike and crush them between us. And now, less than an hour after entering the tunnel, Grizzek was stopping and gesturing toward a wide door set into the wall. Behind this, stairs, the Eric Koa explained, lead us down into Auchenduin proper. Daneth scowled, remembering the maze the Eric Koa had sketched out for him. And you don't know where exactly the Horde will be, or where they've taken their prisoner? He asked again. Unfortunately, the Birdman's answer was the same as before. I know my way into Auchindoun, he said again, but little beyond that. For a second, the shadows of his cowl gave his long, sharp, plain face a sinister cast. Most people, we not truly welcome here. Draenei revere their dead, not appreciate intrusion. I wander, I explore here, learn a little, only a little though. Daneth nodded. He'd known it was too much to hope that the Arakoa could lead him straight to Kurdran. But still he didn't relish the idea of wandering aimlessly through miles of tunnel while the horde warriors crouched in ambush. Grizzik reached for the door and jumped back, beak clacking in surprise, taloned hands rising even as he crouched, as the door shifted and creaked open. Daneth raised his shield and lifted his sword as well, and stopped, staring at the figure outlined in the narrow open door.
You can